The morning began without urgency. I brewed tea, folded laundry, and watered the rose bushes that had grown wild along the fence. Norman's skies often darkened in spring, so when the weather report mentioned storms, I paid it little mind. By mid-afternoon, though, the light outside shifted to a sickly green. At 3:15 the sirens wailed, long and hollow, echoing across the fields. I froze, then reached for the one thing I never let go of, Harold's old sweater, before forcing myself down the basement steps. The house groaned as if it, too, feared what was coming. I sat against the cold concrete wall. Sweater pulled tight. Radio pressed to my ear. Large tornado on the ground, moving northeast toward Norman. The words cut through me. My neighborhood was in its path. The sound built until it was a freight train overhead. Metal shrieking, glass exploding, wood splitting. I could almost picture the kitchen table where Marcus once did his homework ripped from its place. The roof peeling away like paper. For a breathless moment, I thought the walls would cave in on top of me. Then, just as suddenly, there was silence, an eerie, hollow silence that made my ears ring. I climbed the stairs with unsteady legs. Where my living room once stood was only open sky. The table was jammed into the garage wall. Shingles, bricks, pieces of memory were scattered like confetti after a cruel parade. My rose garden had been shredded to soil. I stood in the wreckage of 40 years. Harold's sweater clutched to my chest. And let the truth settle. My house was gone, but I was not. And that meant the hardest part, deciding where to turn, was just beginning. The morning after the storm, I packed what little I had salvaged into the back of Mrs. Ray Patterson's dented sedan. 3 garbage bags of clothing, a box of papers, Harold's toolbox, and the sweater across my shoulders that was all 40 years of life had been reduced to, the insurance adjuster's words still echoed, total loss. As if those 2 syllables could explain the rubble behind me. With nowhere else to go, I steered north toward Edmond, the place my daughter had chosen for her own polished life. The drive took less than an hour, though it felt much longer. Every mile carried me further from the ruins that had once been mine. By the time I turned into Elise's neighborhood, the contrast was unbearable. Perfect lawns, neat driveways, and shutters painted by contractors who had never missed a deadline, not a branch out of place. I pulled up to the red brick house with the wide porch. Elise opened the door almost before I reached the steps, as though she had been waiting for a fleeting second. Relief surged through me. She was my only child. Surely, in the face of disaster, she would open her arms. Instead, her arms crossed. "We want privacy," she said evenly. "My husband doesn't want you here." The words landed heavier than the storm had. It wasn't Daniel speaking. It was her. My daughter. I tried to answer, but nothing came. She pressed a folded brochure into my hand. "There's an extended stay near Quail Springs. Safe. Clean. I'll help with the first week." She tucked a few bills inside the pamphlet. "A few $100 to buy my absence." I stared at her polished nails, her steady gaze, and felt the last remnant of shelter slip away. Without a word, I turned back toward the car, the brochure crumpling in my hand, and drove off, not knowing where to stop next. I drove until the neighborhoods turned into highway, and the lights of Edmond faded in the rear view. The sedan rattled as I pulled into the Walmart lot off I-35, the only place where no one asked questions if you parked overnight. I cut the engine, leaned back in the seat, and stared at the ceiling fabric sagging above me. This was my shelter now, the first night. The adrenaline kept me awake. Every sound, shopping carts rattling, trucks shifting gears felt like a threat. I wrapped Harold's sweater around me and whispered his name just to remind myself I still belonged somewhere once. By morning, I crept into the gas station bathroom across the street. The mirror showed a woman with mud in her hair and red-rimmed eyes. I scrubbed my face at the sink, avoiding the stares of customers filling up their coffee cups, with 3 wrinkled bills and some coins. I bought the cheapest sandwich I could find. I ate it slowly in the car, counting quarters as if they were lifelines. The second night, exhaustion dulled my shame. I parked between 2 RVs and told myself it looked less suspicious that way. My body ached from the seatbelt digging into my side, and I dreamed of the roses torn out of the earth back home. On the third night, I opened my wallet to check the few bills Elise had handed me. That's when I saw it. A yellowed business card, edges worn thin. Jonah Reyes. I hadn't thought of him in years. We'd sat together in study hall at Norman High back in the late 70s. He was always sketching plans for houses on loose-leaf paper, talking about real estate and building things that lasted. I was the girl who carried his pencils, who believed him when he said he'd change the world. But I married Harold instead. Steady and sure. Jonah had gone south to Texas, chasing his ambition. I traced the faded ink with my thumb and felt a weight in my chest. 50 years gone. And here was his name, still waiting in my wallet, that night. Staring at the ceiling of the car, I wondered if I had the courage to call. By the 4th morning, the air inside the car was thick and stale, and my body felt older than its years. I unfolded the business card again. The print nearly rubbed away from decades of handling. My hands shook as I dialed the number, half expecting nothing but a disconnected line. Instead, a deep voice answered. Steadier than I remembered, but instantly familiar. Jonah Reyes. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I stumbled through my name, apologizing for calling after so long, explaining more than I should have. I told him about the tornado, the house, the rejection at my daughter's door. I braced for awkward silence. There was none. His reply was short, certain. Stay where you are. I'm coming. I tried to argue, but he cut me off. Clara, just give me the address. The line went dead before I could say more. 2 hours later, headlights swept across the Walmart lot. A silver truck pulled up beside me, and the door opened. He was older, grayer, broader through the shoulders, but unmistakably Jonah. He tapped gently on my window. When I rolled it down, he smiled and said 3 words. You're safe here. Something inside me cracked open. Not romance, not pity, but a lifeline. He didn't fuss or question. He simply opened the passenger door and helped me gather my bags. This is temporary, he said firmly. You need a roof and rest, but you also need a plan. You're not finished. Clara, you're not broken. I wanted to protest, to say I had nothing left, but his certainty was stronger than my doubt. For the first time since the storm, I felt the ground steady beneath me. I climbed into his truck, clutching Harold's sweater, and let myself believe that tomorrow could hold more than survival. The first night under Jonah's roof, I slept without waking to parking lot noise or the cold bite of an empty car. By morning, the fog in my head had lifted just enough for me to hear his plan. He wasn't offering me a permanent room or a lifetime of comfort. He was offering something else entirely, a way forward. Jonah ran a small renovation firm in Fort Worth. Nothing flashy, but steady. He had crews who trusted him, a network of brokers who respected him, and a reputation for taking properties most people overlooked and turning them livable again. You don't need pity, he told me over coffee at his worn oak table. You need to put your hands back on the wheel of your own life. I thought of the insurance adjuster's cold voice, the number he had offered 90,000, maybe less. It seemed impossible against the scale of what I had lost. Jonah leaned forward, patient. In more. They're rebuilding. Families need places to live, and the city can't keep up. Duplexes. Small units, affordable, sturdy. You could invest, not just survive. The word invest felt foreign in my mouth. For decades, my role had been keeping things afloat, stretching paychecks, sacrificing to cover tuition or mortgages. Yet Jonah's eyes were steady. He wasn't handing me charity. He was giving me the dignity of choice. 2 weeks later, I walked through a battered duplex in Moore with him. Torn siding flapped in the wind, and windows were patched with plywood. But the bones were good. I signed the paperwork with trembling hands, putting down a portion of my payout. My name on the deed felt like oxygen filling a space I thought was gone forever. Soon I was learning to read rent rolls, manage repairs, balance accounts. Tenants called me Ms. Winslow, with respect I hadn't heard in years. When the first rent check cleared, I held the slip of paper like proof that I was not just a widow, not just a mother turned away, but a woman capable of building something that lasted. Jonah didn't congratulate me. He didn't need to. The pride was already mine to carry as we drove back to Fort Worth to plan the next step. It didn't take long for word to travel. In towns like Norman and Moore, people notice who's rebuilding, who's driving different cars, who's no longer on the edge of disaster. My name, once whispered with pity, was now linked with duplexes filling with tenants. I knew it wouldn't stay quiet for long. Elise came on a Saturday afternoon, her SUV polished to a shine, her hair smoothed like glass. She walked into the office Jonah and I shared, above a strip mall, the air carrying the scent of expensive perfume that didn't belong in rooms filled with contractor invoices and paint samples. "Mom," she said, with a brightness too sharp. "You look settled." Her eyes darted over the ledgers on my desk, the checkbook lying open, the stack of receipts I was still learning to organize. She didn't ask about my health, about the nights I had spent in a car, about the sweater that had kept me alive. Instead, she cleared her throat delicately, "Daniel and I have been juggling some things. The interest rates keep climbing. We just need a little bridge. You know, maybe a small loan. Short term, 10, 15,000. Jonah stood by the window, silent but watchful. I felt his presence steadying me. I folded my hands. "Elise, I can't do that." Her smile faltered. "Can't or won't," I said softly. "This is not charity money. This is my life. Rebuilt. I won't risk it." Her eyes narrowed, the polished mask slipping. "So this is who you are now. Playing businesswoman with Jonah Mom. It's a phase. You'll see." I breathed deeply, fighting the urge to defend myself. Jonah spoke before I could. "It's not a phase. Elise, it's respect. Something your mother has earned." Elise gave a brittle laugh, collected her purse, and left without another word. The door closed harder than necessary, rattling the blinds. I sat for a long moment, staring at the ledger on my desk. My daughter's visit had not shaken me. If anything, it made me surer. For the first time, the boundary I had drawn held firm, and I knew it would need to hold again. Jonah never signed anything without a contract. Even for the smallest job, he had the paperwork clear and the terms set. People respect what's written down. He told me one afternoon as we reviewed a lease agreement, "It protects both sides, and it saves you from heartache later." That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and began to write my own terms. Not for tenants or contractors, but for myself. The words looked strange in my handwriting. No loans to family, no co-signing, no rescues. Respect first, money never. I read the lines over and over, my chest tight but steady. For years, I had been the net everyone else could fall into. Elise's late tuition, Daniel's car down payment, even small gifts I couldn't afford at Christmas. I had stretched myself thin and told myself that was what mothers did. But this time, I would not. When Elise called a week later, I was ready. She began sweetly, asking about my tenants, about the duplexes, about whether Jonah and I were really making something of it. Then came the pivot. Daniel had a new project, an investment that just needed backing. I listened, my hand resting on the page of my terms folded inside my notebook. "Elise," I said carefully, "I don't lend. Not to anyone. Not anymore." Her tone sharpened. "You sound ridiculous." "Mom, you think scribbling rules on paper makes you strong. You're still the same woman who begged me for shelter." I let the words pass through me like cold wind. "I am not begging now," I answered. She scoffed, muttered something under her breath, and ended the call. The silence afterward felt heavier than her voice, but not unbearable. I opened my notebook and touched the page again, steadying myself. Jonah's contracts kept his business alive. My terms would keep my soul intact, and for the first time, I believed they would hold, even against my own daughter. The shine of Elise's life lasted longer than I thought it would. She posted pictures of her remodeled kitchen, the quartz counters glowing under pendant lights, the kind of detail she used to scoff at when we flipped through magazines together. She showed off the new SUV in the driveway, all leather seats and technology that seemed more spaceship than car. The children wore crisp uniforms from their new private school, smiling for photos with captions about opportunity and blessings. But behind the gloss, strain began to show. Interest rates climbed steadily in 2022 and into 2023, and their mortgage ballooned in ways Daniel hadn't predicted. What once seemed like a smart loan became a weight pressing on every decision. The SUV came with payments, the school with tuition deadlines, the remodel with credit card bills stacked on top of the mortgage. Neighbors noticed first. One of them whispered to me at the grocery store, lowering her voice as though the shelves might overhear. I saw notices on their door. From the bank, I carried the words home like an ache in my chest. I saw it in Elise's eyes, too. She came by one afternoon with the children, her smile wide but brittle, her laughter too loud. She talked about vacations they were planning, how Daniel was up for another promotion, how they were considering adding a deck to the back of the house. Every word was a performance, lines rehearsed to keep the world from guessing the truth. Her hands gave her away, though they trembled around the coffee cup I poured for her. Knuckles pale, nails immaculate but chipped at the edges. She held on too tightly, as if gripping that cup could keep the rest of her life upright. I listened, nodded, and let her keep her stage. She wasn't ready to admit the cracks spreading through her perfect house, but I knew what it sounded like when walls strained under pressure. I had heard that groan before, just before the roof of my own life had torn away. And I knew, sooner or later, silence would give way to collapse. The first notice came quietly, slipped into their mailbox by the bank. I didn't hear it from Elise. I heard it from a neighbor who thought I should know. A second notice followed, then a third. Soon the whispers grew louder than Elise's practiced smiles. One afternoon, I drove past their street. The SUV still gleamed in the driveway, but the grass was uncut and the curtains were drawn. For a moment, I slowed, tempted to stop, to walk up the porch steps and tell her we could figure it out together. My hands tightened on the wheel as I remembered another porch, another day, when she had folded her arms and said there was no place for me. Images of her childhood pressed against me, her small hand gripping mine on the first day of kindergarten. The nights I worked double shifts to keep our lights on. The way she once whispered that I was her whole world. Those memories collided with the sting of her rejection. The motel brochures, the crumpled bills shoved into my palm. I stayed in the car. I said nothing. Justice didn't always roar. Sometimes it arrived as silence. And this silence was mine to keep. Within weeks, the foreclosure signs appeared. Movers carried boxes down the same porch steps where she had denied me. The perfect house, the curated life, was gone. Elise and Daniel slipped into a rental across town. Smaller, plainer, stripped of the pride they had once wielded like armor. I didn't call. I didn't gloat. I let the silence stand as my answer. Not vengeance, but the boundary I had fought to hold. And in that space, I felt something stronger than victory. I felt the weight of my own dignity settle firmly back into place. I moved back to Norman, not to the street where my old house had stood, but to a modest bungalow near the university. The duplexes in Moore kept me busy, and Jonah handled the parts I couldn't. We were partners, steady and practical, tied not by romance but by trust and the belief that rebuilding wasn't just for houses. Each morning, I walked the short path to my office, ledger under my arm, and felt the strange comfort of routine returning. Tenants called with repairs, rent checks cleared, and little by little I learned to see myself not as someone who had been discarded, but as someone capable of building again. It was on a late afternoon in spring when Elise knocked. She stood on my porch with her hands folded in front of her, the brightness gone from her face. Her words were cautious, almost hesitant. "Mom, I'd like to try again. Not about money, just us." I studied her, remembering both the child who once clung to me and the woman who had closed her door. My voice was calm. "I'm willing, Elise, but it will be on different terms. Respect first. Always." She nodded, her eyes damp, and for the first time in years, I believed she meant it. Whether we would find our way back fully, I didn't know, but the choice was mine now, not hers. Inside, on the desk by the window, sat a frame holding Jonah's old business card. The paper was faded, edges frayed, but it had survived like me. It reminded me that sometimes survival comes not from what you hold on to, but from what you finally allow yourself to claim.